Street photography can be pretty daunting for newcomers. It was for me when I started. The idea of taking photos of strangers while walking around the city wasn't easy to overcome. It took me several years to get comfortable with documenting the streets, but it's a genre of photography which has rewarded me so much and has inspired me to travel the world. So in this video, I want to share a couple street photography tips for those of you starting out. If you're new here, my name is Aaron. I'm a street photographer from London, UK, and on this channel I talk all things photography. If you find any of these tips useful, please consider hitting the subscribe button and remember to hit the thumbs up button as well. Okay, so first up, don't be afraid or discouraged from shooting in auto. Some guides and some photographers will have you believe that to be a proper street photographer, you have to shoot in manual. This simply isn't the case. I know countless street photographers, some which are pretty well known, who shoot in either semi-auto or they shoot completely in auto. When starting out in street photography, it's really easy to overanalyze things like settings and gear. It's something I always done when I started too, and it's the reason why when you go into most photographers' Instagram accounts and you look underneath their photos, you'll always find one person who's asking which settings were used for this photo or which gear they used. However, as time has gone on, I've realized that it's more important to learn how to see a scene and how to recognize an interesting composition rather than getting your settings 100% technically correct. For me, while I'm out doing street photography, I mostly shoot in aperture priority mode. This allows the camera to set the shutter speed and ISO while I control the aperture. These days, most modern cameras are really good at detecting scenes and they can accurately predict which ISO and shutter speed to use. Now, during some circumstances like shooting at nighttime, you may need to take control of the camera, or if you want to do something a bit more creative like long exposure shots, then again, you'll need to take control of those settings. So it is important to know what the settings do and how to use them, because that will allow you to be a bit more creative. But for most of the street photography I do, I leave my camera in semi-auto aperture priority mode and I let the camera handle the ISO and the shutter speed. In all, when starting out, prioritize going out to shoot. Focus on getting used to street photography and finding those interesting compositions. Worry less about your settings, worry less about the gear, and don't be discouraged from going full auto. So one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to street photography is this belief that you have to get up close and personal in people's faces to take photos of them. This simply isn't the case. Street photography is a really broad term, and it can mean pretty much anything you want it to. As long as you are on the street taking photos, it can be defined as street photography. Now, you have photographers like Bruce Gilden who get up close in people's faces, often with a flash. Then there are photographers like Alex Webb who focus more on compositions rather than focusing on a single person. And then you can be even more creative and abstract and just focus on a part of a body, like hands, much like these shots from Vivian Mayer. So when you're next out doing street photography, don't feel the need or feel pressured that you have to get up close to somebody in order for that to be street photography. When I started out, it took me years before I actually started taking photos of people, and to be honest, my favorite type of street photography is when the subject in frame isn't recognizable. I prefer the more abstract type shots, capturing silhouettes, capturing people from behind, because for me that means the viewer can attach their own story or put themselves in the image. But as I said earlier, there are many forms of street photography. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. Find what style suits you, the style you enjoy shooting, and pursue that. Don't feel like you have to get up close to people in order for it to be street photography. As I said earlier, street photography is a really broad term. There is no right way or wrong way to do it. Just get out there and do it the way you feel most comfortable. Okay, so let's talk gear when it comes to street photography. Now, I'm not going to sit here and just tell you gear doesn't matter. It does. But when it comes to street photography specifically, your images don't have to be pin sharp, so you don't need the latest greatest camera and sharpest lens. In fact, the main thing here is to find a camera and lens combo which doesn't get in the way of your photography. With street photography, the emphasis is on finding interesting compositions, interesting scenes, interesting characters. It's not really about capturing the sharpest, crispest image. Now, if you're looking to do product photography or portrait photography, then by all means find the sharpest lens possible, because it's going to make a difference for those type of shots. But in street photography, that doesn't really matter. In fact, I prefer using an old 35mm 1.4 from Fujifilm rather than using their newer sharper lenses, because I feel the older lenses give my images a bit more character. When it comes to street photography, it's more about the composition and what you're capturing rather than the camera you're capturing it with. So for those of you starting out, don't go crazy spending money on the latest camera bodies and camera lenses. Instead, save that money for things like traveling to new places and experiencing that. It's going to be far more valuable in the long run than spending that money on a new camera body and lens. Also, when you're starting out, it's hard to know which focal length you enjoy shooting at. My advice would be pick up the cheapest kit lens you can, head out, shoot for a couple of months, and then work out which focal lengths your favorite shots were taken at. Now in Lightroom, in the corner, you can see which focal length your photos were taken at. So it's an easy way to work out which focal lengths you're comfortable with and which focal lengths you're taking your best photos at. On a quick side note, if you do like the look of the photos in this episode, they were all edited using my preset pack, which is currently on sale, and also help support this channel. If you're interested, I have a link down below in the description. Now it's gonna sound really obvious, but one of the most important factors in getting good at street photography is to put the hours in and do it as often as possible. No amount of textbooks, YouTube episodes, or podcasts are gonna replace the progress you'll make by constantly going out to shoot. When I was starting out, and even to this day, I go out multiple times a week shooting for hours. It's simple. Unless you shoot regularly, you're not going to get better at street photography. The legendary street photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson said that your first 10,000 images are your worst. So while theory is important and learning is important, what's more important is that you get out there and shoot. So that just about wraps up today's episode. As I said earlier, street photography is difficult. In fact, it's one of the harder forms of photography. So I hope the tips in this episode help you. If you have any questions about street photography, drop those in the comments down below and I'll make sure to get back to you. Or if you have any street photography tips of your own for beginners, again, drop those down below in the comments. A huge thanks for watching this episode and supporting this channel. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.